Thank you for coming out tonight. Kind of a chilly night, but a pretty night. And I'd like to thank everybody out there, again in cyberspace, for tuning in wherever you might be. My name is Matt O'Donnell. I'm the associate editor of Bowdoin Magazine here at Bowdoin College. And I'm also the editor and executive director of the poetry nonprofit FromTheFishouse, an online audio archive of emerging poets, which is proud to feature the work of Oliver de la Paz and Evie Shockley, and incredibly pleased to bring them here for you to listen to this evening. This evening's reading is in conjunction with Macmillan House, even though we didn't hold it there tonight, and it's made possible by support from Residential Life and the Dean for Academic Affairs. And Fishouse has also received generous support from the Davis Family Foundation, the William and Joan Alphon Foundation, and the Foundation for Contemporary Arts. And now, without taking any more time, I'm going to introduce Zach Roberts, who will introduce Oliver and Evie.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. So our first poet up tonight is Oliver de la Paz. Oliver de la Paz was born in Manila, Philippines, and raised in Ontario, Oregon. He has a BS in biology and a BA in English from Loyola Marymount University, and an MFA in creative writing from Arizona State University. He's taught at Arizona State University, Gettysburg College, Utica College, and he currently teaches creative writing at Western Washington University. He is also a faculty and advisory board member of Kundiman, a New York-based nonprofit dedicated to fostering Asian American poetry. A recipient of the 2005 New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship, his work has appeared in journals such as Quarterly West, the Cream City Review, Third Coast, North American Review, and elsewhere. His book of prose and verse, Names Above Houses, was a winner of the Crab Orchard Award Series and published by Southern Illinois University Press in 2001. SIU Press published his second collection of poems, Furious Lullaby, this recent fall. So everybody, please welcome Oliver de la Paz.
You want me to put this on?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm missing the debates. I want to thank Bowdoin College and Matt O'Donnell for bringing me up here. It's such a great honor to be in what I think is a poetry renaissance, and Matt and the Fishouse are pretty central to that poetry renaissance, in my opinion. I think that new media is really changing the landscape of poetry, and Fishouse is there at the time when it's all changing for the written word. And I also think that it's fitting that Bowdoin College, the home of Longfellow, Hawthorne, and Stowe, would house such an illustrious organization as Fishouse. So thank you. I'm going to read a poem that was inspired by a poem that I read on Fishouse. I'm going to open with that. And I'm kind of going in reverse chronology. I'm going to start with my newer stuff, go to Furious Lullaby, and then I will close with Names Above Houses, just because you'll see why. I get really depressing at the start, and confessional, and I lay it all out there, and then I have to decompress. So this is a poem entitled Self-Portrait with Taxidermy, and I was inspired by a poem that I found on Fishouse by Matthew Dickman. And he has a whole bunch of wonderful self-portrait poems. So if you haven't looked at the site and you haven't read those poems, go read them. This poem is for Matt. Self-Portrait with Taxidermy. In my anatomy studies, I expected fetal pigs. The pink bodies flush against plastic in a swirl of formaldehyde. The lacquered workbenches of the lab and the light from the fluorescents made us all ghoulish with our tools. I was ready to live with the smell, to pin back the skin with the packet of pins and the scalpels we were given. Instead, the teacher pulled from a refrigerator 6 pheasants he bagged on a weekend excursion to the Sage Desert. Our disappointment hung in our faces, but we shucked it off. The smell of the body cavities and blood was an interminable horizon. A bucket of baking soda between us all. We had to skin the things, yet be gentle enough to keep their skins intact. I settled in. The dissection pans turned white from the powder with drizzles of some unguent, something none of us had ever witnessed. An occasional bead clanged in my pan. My body was riddled with buckshot. I wondered if I'd be able to salvage even the idea of pheasant. I, too, had killed a bird, a headshot from several yards earlier in the year. The loon jerked, then folded like a napkin, its neck sagging like stems from a cut flower. No one ever saw me fire the gun, even though the shot thundered long after. That late afternoon, I had felt volcanic. The clouds came and went, everything sputtered, candle sure, the way the color of childhood was meant to be. The body of a loon rippled some distance. It would soon wash ashore. I was praying the lake wouldn't forsake me utterly, and when its form rolled up the bank, I was quick to bury it, lest my father know that I had played with the rifle, and in my play I had broken. There is so much that clings to us, the licking sound of the lake, the glint of a scalpel catching the green aurora from the humming fixtures. The susurrations of our compressed breathing was boundless. We were awaiting some deliverance from our gory task. The V of a rifle sight dipped true into afternoon biology. Our knives rose and fell, and we quickly scooped the white powder into the wounds we made. The pheasants were surely things that would call to us, to choose us, for one by one we are called to make something ready, to give back form and put everything back in its place. Our school was so poor that we couldn't afford fetal pigs. So our biology teacher, who wasn't really a trained biology teacher, he was a mathematician, had to improvise, and we dissected pheasant. This is a poem that's sort of based around fishing communities. I know that oftentimes in fishing communities there are monuments to fishermen who are lost at sea. The title of this piece is Children Playing Around the Monument to Lost Fishermen. And it borrows a line from Laura Jensen, and the line is, all of them who ran from rain clouds. Children playing around the monument to lost fishermen, after Laura Jensen. All of them who ran from rain clouds collide now with the starched air. They descend into moss, they eat and become chiffon, soft with their handling of folly. All of them are going to the show. All of them are nothing now but false. Pavilions open to them, but there is no audience. The sky is a monument to their care, their sidelong glances, their witchery and bad cooking. There's gold in their fillings. They're filled with golden thoughts and bad ivy. Wasted. They are wasted on hums. They are unremembered. Flowers out of focus from the hills. They rock. Rock still, they web. They bleak. Someone leaves a parasol on a bench. Someone takes a drink from the fountain. The ocean is a dark pitcher. The ocean is an accordion, and shells are sifted notes. All of them are laughing now on the beach. They're taking off their skins. They're coming this way. And recently I had surgery, and one of the after effects of the surgery with some of the medication is that I'm up, and it sort of makes me hot and feverish. It was a thyroid medication that I'm taking in it. Sort of makes me active at night so that I couldn't sleep for a long time. And I was writing these poems in this weird wakeful state. And I'll read you one of them. Insomnia is transfiguration. Because the night is a scattering of sounds, blunt branches hurtling to the ground, a nest stir, a sigh from someone beside me. Because I am awake and know that I am not on fire, I'm fine. It's August. The scar on my neck, clarity. 2 curtains sewn, a little door locked from the inside. Nothing wants anything tonight. There are only stars and the usual animals, only the fallen apple's wine-red crush. Rabbits hurtle through the dark, little missiles, little fir blossoms hiding from owls. Nothing wants to be in this galaxy anymore. Everything wants the afterlife. Dear afterlife, my body is lopped off. My hands are in the carport, my legs in the river, my head, of course, in the tree awaiting sunrise. It dreams it is the owl, a dark-winged habit. Then a rabbit's dash to the apple, shining like nebula. Then the owl scissoring the air. The heart pumps its box of inks. The river's auscultations keep pace with my lungs. Blame the ear for its attention. Blame the body for not wanting to let go. But once a thing moves, it can't help it. There is only instinct, that living yes. Switching over to Furious Lullaby. And I wrote this book essentially as a whole bunch of exercises to keep me writing. I was going through this strange rut of, I had written prose poems. I don't know if you've seen prose poems, and they basically go from one end of the margin to the other end of the margin on a page. And it was so seductive that I had to break it up, and so I had to force myself into giving myself some exercises to get out of that, vibe. And so I set up some obstacles, and I really like writing from constraint. A lot of the times it helps me try to puzzle through. So I had this premise that I would write aubades, and an aubade is a French form, and essentially the idea is that it's a love poem. These lovers are going to separate at daybreak, and so they're sort of trying to argue with each other to stay in bed and enjoy themselves and each other. So I had this form where I would write these aubades. I had my ending all set up. Now, what do you do in the middle of the poem? So a lot of these poems are struggles through the middle, but they were nice little games that I played with myself. Well, that doesn't sound right. And for those of you who are on webcast, I apologize. Nice little games that I played to write poems. How about that? Somewhere, someone in the web has spit up coffee on his monitor. Aubade with memory crystallized into a figure of a dancer. That night was spent searching for a form of fire. The street lights spilled off your face, the corner of the room fully flooded with sapphire, a sticky flame. Earlier, we had found a picture book you kept when you were young, and you wondered aloud, who was that voice? She had wanted to be a dancer. She had wanted to be the moon. Such an awkward grace to be the moon, skyballed, abandoned, zero and sleepless, it aches and it's cold. It is far from fire, yet you crave it as though the rage of sizzling insects, if loud enough, could spur the sun. How do you fathom it then? Childhood singled out, ageless in your pirouettes about the sky, gravityless and wounded. And who would she kiss, I ask, and who would she ache or grieve? And are you still so small and flickering, or is it the window who makes this mistake? Is it the body's bâtiment and blalon that vaults you into the past, beyond sleep? We could not find your toe shoes among the childhood things you hid, though we kept ourselves awake until dawn, searching because you had wanted them, and they had possessed you. They were just shoes, but to you, a snare in the moment is everything. Nothing would convince you otherwise. Not the hour or the way the hour begged you to stop. Though this moment makes you that celestial body, you cannot be that dancer, crystallized into the azure body of that sphere's deepest crevasse. Though there were rivers on that satellite once, the arch of your foot buckles under the weight of your memory. The angels of the past cannot be awakened through the turnings of a simple picture book or the physical gleanings of the body recalling a moment when it was airborne. Despite every aperture of the evening turned to morning, this figure of you that you've memorized, grand bâtiment, would it recognize itself flying, perhaps, or earthbound? Even in daylight, would she laugh? Would she flare? I'm going to read you parts of an obad. It's a longer poem, and I'll just read you 2 parts of it. Widening obad. And now, the filigree of your wrist, as it catches the dawning, moves beyond the room into the alleyways. The man pricing a quarter rind of melon pauses, light ricocheting from his eye into a ball cord across the way. And in the arc of the orb's flight from a child's hand into the hoop, the leather rotates, representing the ever and the now beyond all sunlit rooms, beyond the fade and the double clutch, which we often do when waking to a new century, asking what we once were called in childhoods, ever and now, for the suddenly and always that we wait whole lifetimes for. And we ask for this despite the way cities, tangled in light, slowly grown into the morning the way we do. Dare your wrist become vulnerable like the stems of snow peas snapped in the wind, and the mornings will have succeeded. But to what purpose? Live out your colors to what end? The scent of a halved melon is as remarkable as this. So too, the thud of a basketball on the sidewalk, released and gathered and released again. There are whole moments riddling to things coming to irrelevance, the body lighter in its repose, the hush of a ball through the basket. It is September, and the crystals have begun to form on the windows. Earlier, you brought the heavy blankets out from the closet and packaged yourself into a crisp bundle between them, sealing off all the cracks. Wrapped as you are prepared to hatch if the sun crossed your face, the only part of you exposed. Here and now, the last of the summer spiders have crossed into our realm, and I was about to kill them all last night with a shoe, but you stopped me. If in your sleep they were to fall out of their webs, widening in the corner of our room, I would take them in my hands to the window because it is your urging. I would cradle them past the ruins of this poem to face the morning. Or I would nudge you from your sleep and tell you of the far places light reaches when we are not awake. Those sunlit mornings of simple gestures are what keeps us sometimes. If I were to wake you, would you be ready to live in a world where everything important is small, where the growing nest of the moment couldn't possibly save us? I'll read one last poem from this book. An editor told me that I didn't have enough danger in this poem. So I stuck a antagonist in, and that protagonist is the devil. I mean, you couldn't get any better than the devil, right? You got to have the devil in a poem. Obod with a heel of bread, a heart, and the devil. After rain sputters to an end and there is nothing but pulse. After Venus smells fill the room like a gun firing. After steam and lullaby of early morning cock-a-doodle-doo, I think my name 25 times, a dulcet song in time to the tune of the dog brushing his side against the fence, and know it is the hour of naming my ghosts. In the time it takes for the curtain edges to define, I will mistake a heel of bread for a lung, and the devil will dance off the knife edge jabbed into the crust. I will be a phantom tattoo and the bone rattle of ice in the trees. I will darken and harvest, and you will know me by the starlings and the killdeer and the crow. But for now, what the hell do I know? For now, I farewell the evening, farewell cigarette and bourbon, farewell my devil with your blue torch. Here I am, the Vina Cava, the septum, the shunt. So there, editor. A couple poems from Names Above Houses. Things that you need to know about this book. There are 3 protagonists in this piece. It's basically a novella in verse. And the main character is named Fidelito. And Fidelito is the diminutive of fidel or faith. And he thinks he's an angel. He thinks he's a holy person. So you'll get the sense here. Bye. Fidelito takes flight up a ladder. A blur of upwardness that is climbing. The flat board pressed to palm, pressed to foot sole, it becomes motion. Slurred arrival, which Fidelito makes. First step, second step. The ladder stretches like an awkward smile of hello, of departure. The boy, trusting only what he feels by hand, begins to forget the ground. With his right foot on the first rung, he hears the sky call his name. When the left meets the right, he hears bird call. Then the horizon moves on. Then the last board before the fall. When the right and left are reconciled, Fidelito finds himself unsteady, his legs paired as if bound. A pause. Nowhere left to go. Meanwhile, in the blue above, the larks explode like hours following hours. This next poem, just a little setup. Has anyone ever been to Lourdes? You know what Lourdes is? It's this place in France where, in Catholicism, I guess, they go there and make pilgrimages to gather water from the grotto, where allegedly, the image of the Virgin Mary appeared before Saint Bernadette. So my mother and my father took me to Lourdes to make such a pilgrimage, and it's sort of this weird, tourist trap where they're selling these little bottles. They sell these little bottles about this big, and they're in the shape of the Virgin Mary. And my mother, being the devout Catholic that she is, I hope she's not watching. She probably isn't watching. Thank goodness she's not web savvy. She bought like 20 of these little bottles that are in the shape of the Virgin Mary, and you fill them up with that holy water, And, you give it to friends and you put it in places that you need holiness. Anyway, so we still have like 20 of these bottles lying around our house, and like I open closet doors and there they are. Constant reminders. The poem before this is entitled Three Madonnas. I'm not reading that poem. I'm reading this poem. It's called The Fourth Madonna. The Fourth Madonna. She's a statuette the size of a child's thumb. The boy thinks she speaks to him. Fidelito hides her from the television's aquarium light, fearing that she may drown the way Domingo sinks below the surface of the cathode. She appears in the bathroom on top of the toilet's water tank to prove that she's wholly unafraid. She has been washed in Fidelito's pant pocket 4 times, a miracle that her paint has not chipped. She has appeared in wars with other statuettes her same size. The green army men freeze, toppling over when they see her. At night, she swings from a string hung from the ceiling of the boys' room, circling with the propeller blade of the ceiling fan. She blesses the room with her blue arcs. I'm going to close with this poem. It's entitled School Years. And do you know what pencil break is? It's this game where you take pencils and you try to snap them. You know what it is. Okay. School years. They last long for Fidelito, who is not of this earth, with its alphabets and loose-leaf sheets of construction paper, oranges, blues, lunch boxes, crepe paper, paper mache, the teacher talk, and rasp of chalk, long division, multiplication, pronunciation, spelling, and quelled hungers at lunch hour, the recesses of chase the girls, boys, catch as catch can, freeze tag, war with rubber balls and big red welts the size of baseballs, war with a deck of cards, war of pencil breaking or tetherball, kickball, being goofballs in the back near the coat racks, learning to cuss and whistle at the same time, saying, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, holy, 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 Lord, the girls who dare each other to kiss Fidelito, as he sits in the corner, dazed, watching birds in the frozen light. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was Oliver de la Paz. So our next poet is Evie Shockley. Evie Shockley is the author of a chapbook, which is the Gorgon Goddess, which was published in 2001, and the collection of A Half-Read Sea, which is in 2006, both with the Carolina Wren Press. Her poetry also appears widely in national journals such as the Beloit Poetry Journal, Callaloo, and Crab Orchard Review, and is collected in anthologies such as Poetry Daily, poems from the world's most popular poetry website. That's your second. And Rainbow Darkness, an anthology of African American poetry, among many others. Ms. Shockley is a graduate fellow of Cave Canem, the renowned Writers Center for African American Poets and Writers, and was awarded a residency at the Hedgebrook Retreat for Women's Writers in 2003. She is an assistant professor of English at Rutgers University, where she teaches African American literature and creative writing. So everybody, please welcome Evie Shockley.
Thank you all. Let's see. Being female, where am I going to do with this? Okay. Is that going to be close enough to do any good? I'm okay? Okay. Thank you to Bowdoin. Thank you to Matt. Thank you to From the Fish House. And thank you all of you here and wherever for being here to share poetry. Sometimes I have a very deliberate scheme for my readings, but tonight I think it's a little bit more intuitive. So I'll try to set these up in ways that might make sense of the progress through the book, through the reading, but if not, just roll with it. The first poem I'm going to read is from A Half-Read Sea, and it is called Shall Become As, and that title is the middle of a longer phrase, which you might be able to come up with. The phrase that you hear in weddings, the two shall become as one, right? I started thinking about that, and I thought that was a really mysterious process, that shall become as. Well, how? And with what result? So this is a poem thinking about that. Shall become as. You put this pen in my hand, and you take the pen from my hand. The night before the full moon, the moon seems full. What is missing is a dark and hungry sickle, the sliver of shadow eating us up inside. After the mountains breathe their mint and sorrow green against the long summer sky, they burst into hot October laughter, lighting the horizon with citrus, rust, and blood. You put this knife in my hand. We pull. We meet as oceans come together, heaving against and clinging across our salt, watery boundary. We approach endlessly like two rails of one track, tied in a parallel that promises our eyes to merge someplace far off in the distance. You put this feather in my palm. My fingers close around flight. The next poem I'm going to read is a prose poem that I dedicate, as always, to the people of New Orleans, wherever they may be. It's called Atlantis Made Easy. Orange was the color of her address, then blue silt. Whiskey burned brown down the street, then a dangerous drink whirled around a paper umbrella. Intoxication blew across the porch, then rose in the attic. Bloated Tuesday taught us she's never been dry and never will be. Brass, bass, ivory, skins. I hate to see that Ninth Ward wall go down. Army Corps engineers ran a train on her. Ah, Cher, sweet ghost, saturated, deserted, teething ground for the expected specter. We knew it'd show up better late against a black backdrop whenever. Wait in the water. Wait in the water, children. Stub your soul on a granite memory, a marble key change, an indigo mood. Trouble, the water. What I'm going to do now is go to some newer work, and I'll come back at the very end to a poem from the book. These next poems are from a chapbook. Well, some of them are from a chapbook that was published by Belladonna Books. If you are interested, you'll have to Google Belladonna Books and look for it online, because I think that's about the only way you can get it. But it's called 31 Words, Prose Poems. And the chapbook contains the first 13. I'm going to read a few of these from the book and then move on to some that I've written since. And they're very short. They're all 31 words long. I wrote them at at a time when I had just published A Half-Read Sea and couldn't find my way into what was next for me poetically, and I stumbled across a call for, I think it was actually prose, 31-word long prose, and I thought, I could write 31 words. I could do that. So they started, and they are still coming. Mostly I will just read them without introducing. They're on all kinds of subjects. They move around thematically all over the place. There's a small sequence of them that are connected, and I'll let you know about those. And the rest will just come without introduction. Once there were 31 words. They couldn't get along. They couldn't go back where they came from. They couldn't decide whether to be California or fuck California. Here they are, addressing you. In the beginning, he, she, or it always. The only exception, then one day, no one ever thought. Chapter 17. He or she said, the next thing we knew, reader I. Everybody made predictions and everybody ignored the predictions. It rained and rained, but that wasn't the problem. It was the breaking and the failing. Poor, poor, please don't drink the gasoline. Vanilla, chocolate, white bread, black coffee, granola, juice, meat and potatoes, fried chicken and collard greens, sauerkraut, coleslaw, tuna casserole, rice and beans, pears, watermelon, tapioca pudding, sweet potato pie. Highly visual rural winter image seeks lyric poem, 14 to 30 lines, for mutual enrichment and long-term relationship. Image offers frost-bitten river and fog-covered fields where snow seems to rise toward its origins. No color is strange to war. It taints even delicate tints. Pink rimming eyelids of the sleep-starved and grieving, or on a ribbon floating away from a cluster bomblet's belated heat. The next 6 are little tiny tributes to, let me adjust the equipment here. Is that better? Okay. Tiny tributes to women poets who have been important to me in one way or the other. And I'll just tell you who they are. H.D., Gwendolyn Brooks, Phyllis Wheatley, Stein, Ann Spencer, and Harriet Mullen. Who done it? Turned the flowers of salt water and sand into hieratic drawings sketched with words. Sent a phantom Helen decoying to Troy. Hardly Dickinsonian, hyacinth dame, heroic divine. You grew something new from red woe, a boy's broken body and the wooden rose. Like Mamie, you knew it was no time to deny the gore and dolor. Slender muse, far too tender for the demigods who stole, slew, and made you remake yourself, in whose image only you can remember, she whose eyes were treasures of the sun. How could I homage Gertrude Stein? How could I? How could you, Stein, age Stein, Gertrude Stein, homage, home in on Gertrude Stein? How? Ah, Gertrude Stein, you shouldn't have. And were you ever honest, even in Indian costume? Always, as truthful as lightning, as open as the serious flower, as honest as I could be with a mouthful of poetry. She is merry yet sullen. She is airy yet woolen. She is fairy net fallen. She is Larry met Ellen. She is prairie sweat pollen. She is starry, wet, swollen, unstolen. And the last 4 of these that I'll read are all sort of based on puns, which I hope you'll be able to hear. You deserve a decent love poem, but this indecent one must do. My ardor's totally exposed. It's truly unruly and goes naked in public places. Happily, it has never been arrested. Small letters signify to some an author's sense of her inconsequence, to others disgraceful defiance. From either standpoint, she who starts sentences or writes I's in lowercase commits a capital offense. 31 words at the airport, didn't know if they were coming or going. They wanted to follow all directions at once. They cleared security with one quick compliment. You're the bomb. "31 words entered a beauty pageant, got all gussied up, glittering in thaumaturgic adjectives, teetering on the points of P's and Q's. Then they stayed home, so they'd really be missed. Now, a few newer poems, the ones that started to come after the 31 words reopened the flow. You'll have to tell me. I may be losing track of time, so let me know if I'm going over. This next one is called The Defense of Marriage Act, Alternatives 2. Act like you've seen breasts before. Act like you can have sex when you get home. Act like you made a promise. Act like you've got some sense. Act like a commitment is a commitment is a commitment. Act up. Act like you've got a ring on your finger. Act like you know a tax break when you see one. Act 1, boy meets girl. Act 2, boy marries girl to her girlfriend. Act 3, boy attends 20th anniversary party for girl and her wife. Act natural. Act like there's an entire globe of people invested in this institution. Act like the best defense is not offensive. Act like you want a wife, not a live-in nanny. Act like you want a husband, not a sperm bank. Act like there's more than one way to bring children into a family. Act right. Act like you love your spouse. Act like this institution is more contractual than penal. Act like any vows can be as meaningful as your own. Act like marriages are not the problem with marriage. Act like you've heard of separation of church and state. Act now. This is a very quick one for those of you who know your grammar. It's called In a Non-Subjunctive Mood. If I had $1 for every drop of Iraqi blood spilled, every woman raped, every life destroyed in this war, I'd be Halliburton. While we're on the subject of politics, this next poem, I was thinking because Oliver mentioned the debates, and we're in the process of what we are reminded constantly is a very historic moment in terms of America's electoral politics. I want to take us further back in history and remind us of the first African American who ran for the office of president, who was a woman, Shirley Chisholm. This poem is for her. The title is a pun, or the first word of the title, I should say, is a pun, so you should listen for that. And the poem itself then is a list that the the title introduces. Ode to Shirley Chisholm. A nation outrageous in its hunger for heart, not hearts, and enough sun-touching ladders to go around. Hearty anger, unquenched by wet American crutching dreams, unmuted by the sound of rising dough. Yards of respect wrapped round her shoulders, more warming than fur because comprising her due as a woman who ate boulders for breakfast bravely. Credit for having an analysis of power sharper than Sapphire's tongue, and props for behaving like a natural woman, a world shaper who deserved a room, a trust of her own, the Oval Office, democracy's throne. I don't fish, but I do sort of, my father and my grandfather fished a lot. When I was growing up, I would see them off on early morning fishing trips, and they would come back midday with dinner. So all that to say, I don't know. It struck me one day last summer. I live in Jersey City. I was surprised, I guess, in a way, to see people fishing off one of the docks and one of the piers, and so that caught my poetic eye and became the image that this poem describes. It's a Geigen. This poem is a Geigen, which is a form created by wonderful poet Ruth Ellen Kocher, and this poem is called Being in the Perfection of a Jersey City July. Walking down the Hyatt Pier, propelled by the beat a simple, slim machine discharges into my ears, I notice two folks fishing the Hudson. We all seek the same catch. This day, the sweet breeze soothing a luminous sky. The man retreats from the rail, his rod held up and tilted back, his feet stuttering, his eyes glued to the sun-spread water, as if God were dragging him away from his sport by the pole's tip end. Suddenly, fluidly, all the motion shifts forward. From this distance, I must intuit the flick of his wrist from the ghost of wrists past. I just happened to be looking down the hotel pier, compelled by the beat his feet seemed to follow, my eyes cast across the sun-spread water, and though his line flying out should have been visible only as a filament of my imagination, as I watch, it becomes a thin mirror, a reflection of light and wind sailing over river, suspended just long enough for me to catch it and swallow. 3 more poems. Okay. This next poem is called Her Table Mountain. And if anyone has been to South Africa, especially Cape Town, you'll know this reference. I mean, the Table Mountain is this huge, flat-topped mountain that's right. The city of Cape Town is built around the base of it, between the mountain and the coast, the Cape. And I was lucky enough to visit Cape Town this past summer. And when I got back, I was in an email exchange with a friend who had also been, and he would write, "Oh, did you see Table Mountain, da 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 da," and the back and forth. I just found myself thinking, wow, we had 2 fairly different experiences because of the context for me of being in South Africa and knowing its history. And so this poem came out of that exchange and that visit. The epigraph is from right from my friend's email, and there are another couple of lines in the poem which I hope you'll be able to catch that are from his email. Her Table Mountain. there's one more thing I should say. There's a reference to District 6, which is a neighborhood of Cape Town that was razed to the ground. People evicted and the neighborhood torn down as a way of moving out a colored mixed population in support of apartheid. Her Table Mountain, epigraph. Every poet has a table mountain tucked right beneath epidermis, waiting for the prick of evening wind for release. They'd been to the same city, but she wouldn't have known it. He came home blissing about jacaranda in bloom. On her visit, winter hid color behind the thick gray of clouds and rain, except for those pastel houses hiking up the steep slopes of the Bocap, a little squint and see San Francisco quarter early Muslims had raised like a garden in the town. He sang in liquid tones of how the Atlantic reached down and crooked her blue finger round this lucky cape before giving the seabed over to the Indian Ocean. She recognized that body too, instinctively. There, the same wet cradle and grave it was where she knew it best. But there it was also jailer and jail, cruel cup in which rose the knuckle of land where Mandela and Sisulu couched their hopes across an ignorant count of years. His Table Mountain was a vast, gentle lover. I spent the clearest night of my life on its summit. All the universe was caught up in my throat. She recalled her ascent. The cable car, as it lugged itself from high to heights, twirled her once around in a slow, careful dance across the sky. Even gray, the views were punctured with beauty, the steel blue bars of ocean rolling into the waterfront, buildings pushed unpredictably into parallels or angles with one another, like a jar of pearly rectangular buttons spilled, splayed, and then swept into a haphazard constellation, arrayed from water to mountain base and out onto the flats in an endless shimmering. The craggy stone of the mountain face, foreboding and unforgiving terrain. She spent the coldest afternoon of her life on that summit, coatless in 30-degree winds, her numb fingers cramped around her camera, ankles turning on the trail's uneven rock. Between billows of mist, she gazed down into a city that had tried to cut out its own heart. It still bore the grassy scar where District 6 had thrummed, and she loved it, utterly, open-eyed, as fiercely as if it were hers or herself, despite the miserable August weather, despite the acid tang she detected in his place of sweet waters, despite the history of peoples chained and chaining, killed and killing, that hung over it like the clouds over that prehistoric mountain. This next poem was inspired, I guess, initially by the arrival of my twin nieces. My sister had them in May, and I was able to go up very soon after and spend some time. And my mother, who is there helping with the twins, would sing every morning the song that this poem begins with. And it got in my head, and then started to get mixed up with my thoughts and concerns about the kind of world they would be growing up in and into. So this is the poem that resulted. It's called Duck, Duck, Redux, and there are two epigraphs. The first one is, "Those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it," George Santayana. And the second, "Those who cannot forget the past are destined to remix it." That's me. This is the way we wash our face, wash our face, wash our face. This is the way we wash our face so early in the morning. This is the way we segregate our schools in 1896. This is the way we segregate our schools in 2007. Mary had a little lamb, a bad, bad black sheep with 3 bags full of wool. It followed her to school one day, work one day, Wimbledon one day. It followed her to church one day, which was against the rule. This is the way we patrol the roads in the antebellum South. This is the way we patrol the streets in our shiny New York. Cue wedding bell. Oh, bring back my Shawnee to me. This is the way we appropriate black culture in the post-Reconstruction period. This is the way we appropriate black culture in the 21st century. This little piggy went to market, got mad bling for spitting whack rhymes and calling women hoes, and still wound up crying, wee, 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 all the way home. This is the way we use a noose in Jim Crow America. This is the way we use a noose in Gina, Louisiana. Little blues boy, come blow your horn. I'm sorry to tell you, but his horn's done gone. And as for the boy who used to blow so sweet, he's under a mountain of debt, working for minimum wage. This is the way we wash our hands of you historically, throw you into the Atlantic, spray you with Birmingham hoses. This is the way we wash our hands of you today, with jerry-rigged levees. So early, so early in the millennium. And just a quick last poem to send us on our way on a note of healing. That's what I usually think of with this poem. This is called You Must Walk This Lonesome, and it's a poem that takes shape. I mean, it's a prose poem, so in one sense it doesn't have that kind of a shape, but it takes its structure from borrowed lines and sort of modified lines from spirituals and hymns. You must walk this lonesome. Say hello to moon leads you into trees as thick as folk on Easter pews. Dark, but venture through. Amazing, was blind, but now fireflies, glittering, dangling from evergreens like Christmas oracles. Soon you meet the riverbank. Down by the riverside, water baptizes your feet. Moon bursts back in, low, yellow, swing low, sweet chariot of cheese, shines on in the river. Cup hands and sip what never saw inside a peace be still. Mix in your tears. Moon distills distress like yours, so nobody knows the trouble it causes. Pull up a log and sit until your empty is full, your straight is wool, your death is Yule. Moonshine will do that. Barter with you what you got for what you need. Draw from the river like it is well with my soul, O moon, you croon, and home you go.